Clap. Okay, so there I was, 7 years old, a punk little kid, growing up in the early 2000s. I had a CD player and I played 2 CDs. Take Off Your Pants and Jacket by Blink-182 and All Killer No Filler by Sum 41. On the CD player, there was a treble boost and a bass boost, and I would listen to those records over and over again. When you listen to it with the treble up, it felt like a totally new record. When you listen to the bass, it felt like a totally new record, and I did that. So that's when I decided that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to make music, I wanted to be in music, I wanted to do that. Not when I grew up, but now. So after 22 years of big dreaming with a couple bands that almost made it, toured in over 10 countries, starved on the road the entire time, stealing chili and cheese from 7-Eleven, and recording endless amounts of local bands in my area, I finally feel like I'm at the point where I wanted to be when I was 7 years old. So here's my journey of how I did it, and how you definitely can too, because I believe in you. So let me show you. When you start to pursue music, you don't know how you're gonna do it. All you know is you wanna be like Sum 41 in the credits of Malcolm in the Middle and have some 7-year-old kid listen to it and then beg his parents to buy that CD. My point is, you know that you wanna be a rock star, so you start trying. I like to call this phase, you're really good at trying, and you practice until your fingers fall off phase. When I was 7, I picked up drums and I picked up guitar. I played my dad's Guild X79. Used to be playable, it's not anymore. I'm gonna do a video remodeling this in the future. But so I played on that guitar and I had a free drum kit that I got from my neighbors. Maybe my neighbors hated my parents and wanted me to practice for hours and hours and torture them, because that's all I did. So from ages 7 to 12, I practiced until I was considered a child prodigy. This wasn't born talent. I practiced until my fingers were blistered, because all I knew was I just wanted to make punk rock music, so I needed to get good. And then when I was 12, my parents moved to a new town and I lost all my friends. And out of boredom, I just started uploading YouTube videos. I'd do a cover of Cartel or Canon and D rock version. I had little to no success, but I loved every second of it. It was keeping me sane. Even with the occasional hate comment, which I still don't understand who's bashing a 12-year-old on YouTube. It was probably some guy who works at a bank who wishes he could cover Unholy Confessions by Avenged Sevenfold on an Ibanez Geo. That song was sick. That song still is sick. So anyway, I did that for a couple years, and a kid in my school found my videos, and he didn't know that we went to the same school, so he said, hey, we should start a band. So we did. It was a terrible pop punk band. We had lyrics like, you're the ham to my cheese, the sandwich I love. It was a terrible band, but it was a great learning experience. We got a mixer that we used for practice, and it came with Cubase LE, which was the learner's edition. And I did all the first recordings for my own band, got to play our first shows where we covered Oasis Easy Core version. And I started getting connected in the local scene. At 17, that's when most kids start thinking about college. My bandmates wanted to go. I didn't. I wanted to tour. As soon as school was done, I wanted to hit the road and I wanted to take music seriously. So I left the band and it left a rift in my friendship, but music was more important at that time. And they just didn't understand the mission I was on. Honestly, nobody understood my mission. My parents, my friends, other family members, no one believed in me. There's still some who don't, which is fine. Not everybody's gonna hear Sum 41 in the credits of Malcolm in the Middle and then beg their parents to buy them that CD and change their life path forever. So my senior year, I started another band and we picked up where I left off, playing local shows, practicing, but with one big difference. We were serious. We printed merch, we handed out stickers to kids outside the mall who smoked cigarettes, and we eventually shot a music video, which was the big turning point. We had a friend from school with a nice camera and we spent a weekend shooting a music video in his backyard.
Why'd you scream light? I said I'm gonna be like light.
And when we finally finished editing it and posting it, it got close to 1 million views. So at this time, iTunes was king and we sold over $5,000 worth of singles. So we then took that money and we invested it in better equipment, we invested in a trailer, we even started renting out VFW halls so that we could book our own shows. And that's really when I started meeting a bunch of other bands in the local scene. And at that time, I was still recording my own band, and these other bands really liked how we sounded and asked me to record them. I didn't necessarily want to be a producer or a recording engineer or whatever, but I needed the little bit of cash, which at the time I was recording for $100 a song. I needed the little bit of cash so I could get back on the road and sustain myself on tour, because my main mission was to be in a band. Plus, I started getting really close with all those bands and they became my homies, so I wanted to help them out. I started getting pretty good at recording, but I wasn't great. That second band eventually got signed. We released a couple full-length records and we had vinyl records printed, which I just found the last one I have. It's still in the plastic, but I'm not opening this. So we did a bunch of small package tours, which basically just means like 2 small bands get together, because no big touring band is going to take us out. We would tour across the country and we had a tent that we slept on the road because we couldn't afford hotels, and we really weren't making any money, but we were starting to feel the buzz of success. There was people who came out to our shows, wanted to take pictures, we did signings. It was really starting to feel like we had something going. While we were touring, we kept buying these crappy vans for like $2,000 and they kept exploding. We probably went through 5 different vans, and eventually we said, hey, let's just get a shuttle bus, we'll throw a bunch of money into it, we'll get some bunks, and we can sleep on it, we can really tour full time. And the first tour we left with it, it exploded on the road, the fuel pump went, we got some bad gas somewhere, there, and the mechanic didn't know what he was doing, and the whole thing fell apart. Long story short, we ran out of money. We were stressed out. There was just no way that we could keep going as that band. So after the shuttle bus exploded, it kind of really left a bad taste in our mouths, and we were a band for a couple years. We did 2 full lengths, 2 EPs. We had a little bit of success, but we really weren't where we should have been with how much music was out. So we decided we were going to start another band. Honestly, I think our issue with that previous band was we had too much pride. You know, I was doing the recording myself. We were booking our shows ourselves. When somebody wanted to help us, like a producer in the area who believed in us, who would have charged us $250 to record a song when he really charged $2,000, I said, why would I give you $250 when I could use that $250 for some merch that we could sell on the road for our little package tours? When really, we should have recorded with him, our songs would have been better, maybe our band would have been bigger. So we ended that band and we started a new band with the same band members, just a different band name and a more dialed in sound. It was like a skate, surf, pop punk band with some breakdowns. So I bought a Fender Mustang and a reverb pedal, and we dialed in our sound and had a little bit more personality. We still recorded ourselves, but we sent out our music to be mixed by a real pro this time. That band ended up getting signed on the first EP, and we picked up where we left off, but we leveled it up again by touring overseas and doubling the amount that we were on the road that year. And we landed on a couple Spotify curated playlists, which put us in the running with real bands, even though we didn't feel like we were one. Because we were touring so much, I'd do anything for cash. I'd drive for Uber, I'd record a million local bands for whatever they could afford, and I started building studio desks out of plywood, and I would deliver the desks to studios in the area using my band's trailer, which is important to remember for later. The cycle was make some money, spend it on tour. Make some money, spend it on tour because our van exploded. Make some money, spend it on tour because I fell skateboarding in Ohio and smashed my face and I had to pay for a hospital visit, and so on and so forth. So we did this for a while, and like most bands, every band member has a strong personality, and being locked in a van all the time, you're bound to start butting heads. So we broke up badly. I wanted to keep doing that band, but one of the band members changed the passwords on all the accounts so I couldn't get into it, and I lost access to the fan base we had worked so hard for. This was my one and only dream, and it's being taken hostage in someone else's hands. So I decided, okay, first band, everyone wasn't on board. Second band took it seriously, but didn't have much direction. Third band took it seriously, had direction, but didn't get along with band members. I did everything myself. I recorded the instruments, wrote all the songs, booked all the tours, so on and so forth. It just got to be too much. The band imploded. Even with all the success we had with 1 EP and 1 single released, which the previous band, it took 2 full-length records and 2 EPs to get where we were at that point. So I said, okay, let's try this again. Let's start a 4th band, but this time with guys I really trusted. I picked the best available guys from bands that I recorded who could all really play and were all really hungry for the same dream as me. We finished some demos and we picked up where my last band previously left off. We started doing a couple tours and we started talking to the biggest labels you can think of in rock music. And then, boom. While I was on the West Coast doing some meetings, my laptop and my hard drive got stolen out of our rental car, and I lost all the demos we were working on and we were showing the labels. And then shortly after, the pandemic hit. No touring, no recording bands, no point. Which brings us to phase 2. Asking for help can actually help. So during the pandemic, I delivered Chinese food, which actually wasn't really that bad. I made bank because everybody wanted Chinese food during the pandemic. My band was still jamming, but we didn't even know if it was possible to still be a band anymore because a bunch of venues were getting shut down. Every tour was getting canceled. So I just delivered Chinese food, saved up a bunch of money, and decided I'm going to start taking recording music seriously. So I started buying some real gear, and I wanted to open my own studio. Even though it seemed impossible because rent is so expensive in New Jersey, I was willing to rent out a storage unit and start building a studio out of there. So I started by buying a couple interfaces, and I was going to lock them together so I could have 16 inputs, and I couldn't get them to communicate to each other, so I ended up calling a bunch of producers, one of them being one of my previous clients that I had built a studio desk for. And that guy said, oh, I could probably help. Why don't you come by the studio? Let's see if we could figure it out. Which was really nice of him because the desk I built him, he didn't end up using, and it was terrible. So when I went to a studio, he was actually in a session with a band, and that band had opened for one of my previous bands in the past, which really worked out in my favor because they made me look really good. They ended up telling him when I left the room that they were really nervous that I was there, which doesn't really make sense because I showed up and we were just telling dick jokes and talking about how fun that show was and whatever. So either way, it worked out in my favor. The producer and I talked for a while, and I told him how I wanted to open my own studio, and he said, F that, you should come here. He said, just pay me a couple $100 a month and you can use the space. It was a real studio. It had a ton of gear because he was collecting his whole life. So that really showed me that all the years of grinding, touring, and building studio desks wasn't for nothing. I built that guy a desk, and that band had opened for one of my previous bands and made me look good in front of the producer. Now I have my dream job working at an incredible studio. So I spent the next 2 years working there, dialing in my skills, making decent money, and I didn't have to do side gigs to fund what I really wanted to do, which was make music. And I spent a lot of money on plugins and gas getting to and from the studio because my only daily driver was my band's van, which I eventually converted into my getaway van with shag carpet, a bed, and a mini kitchen. Because I was getting so busy at the studio, I couldn't afford to keep driving back and forth. I started sleeping in the parking lot. That's how seriously I took it. I started losing track of time, and my band sort of just became a for fun thing, which was fine with me because I loved recording. And instead of being in one band, I got to be the extra member in everybody's band, and I was having a ton of fun doing it. There was only one problem. This wasn't my studio. Even though the owner was incredible and the studio had a massive amount of gear, there was only so much time I could take out of the calendar every month without feeling bad that I was taking time away from one of the other producers that needed to use the studio. I was making decent money, but what would happen if a band came over and spilled their Mountain Dew all over the Neve channel strip that we got off a real Neve console converted into a rack unit? That's irreplaceable. And if anything else broke, I really couldn't afford it. It started getting stressful and I was capped with how much money I could make. And then on top of that, I went through a really hard point in my personal life. Everything fell apart, and unfortunately, it led me to leaving the studio. Which brings us to the last phase, phase 3. I call this freedom and finally making it. I had spent my whole life at this point working on music. I was 28 years old. I never really had a real job. I was in a constant battle of making money versus progressing my career. I could record a bunch of local bands, but it was really rare that one of them would pop off. There was only so much I could charge these guys without them getting burned out. And it was really fun, but it would never really progress my career. So my rates would never increase, and I would always be making just enough. Or I could try to record a band that was slightly out of reach, but I couldn't really charge them because otherwise it wouldn't be worth it to them. They would rather go to somebody who's more qualified. So that's what I needed to progress my career, but I needed to make money. So it really was a double-edged sword of make a little bit of money, starve and progress. Make a little bit of money, starve and progress, just like when I was touring back in the day. So that's when I decided to reevaluate. I have a girlfriend who's super supportive, and we decided together, because she's sort of on a similar path as me, that we need to downsize. So we sold a lot of our things, we bought an RV, and we travel half the year, and we live cheaply, which I love because I missed traveling when I was touring so much. So now that my expenses are lower, I can work with bigger artists in exchange for royalties and keep progressing my career without having to starve. I still take on a ton of mix work, and then when I'm back in Jersey, I still record a bunch of bands. But while I'm on the road, I just write songs remotely and work with people remotely, and it works out great. At first, I was afraid that not working at a real studio was going to hurt my business and income, but it didn't. After all the years of touring I had done and all the people I'd met, from building studio desks to recording local bands and playing a million shows to 3 kids in Ohio or 50 kids in New Jersey or whatever it was, there was always somebody reaching out that I had met or I had run into that had a new band or was still in their old band or started managing bands, and they always need somebody to produce. The point is, I put in all that work and it seemed pointless, but it wasn't. My calendar is full and I'm making a decent living in the thing that I really wanted to do, which was music. I'm sure 7-year-old me would be really happy where I'm at now, but it was 22 years of starving on the road to get where I am now. And honestly, I'm sure everything will change again when the aliens finally attack and take over the world, but I'll embrace it. I'll record some alien punk bands and we'll make it work. So you could record your first song and you could blow up, or it could take 22 years. But it's worth a try because you only got one life to really go for your dream. As the great Jim Carrey said, you can fail at what you don't want, so you might as well take a chance on doing what you love. Go write some songs, put them out.